One of the best parts of following Jesus, besides the fact that your life can be changed and you can become a transformed person, is the fact that we get to do it together in community. Relationships are at the very heart of Christianity. This is not a religion that we do by ourselves. And I've said for years, and I mean this, that the quality of our relationships will directly determine the quality of our lives. It's that simple. In his book, Practicing the Way, that we've recommended with this series, John Mark Comer says this: you don't need a PhD in clinical psychology to realize that we become like the people we spend time with. The odds are you dress, vote, think, spend money, and live like your friends. Human beings influence each other. That's not a secret. So Comer's argument is that the people that we're around on a regular basis heavily influence us in the way that we see and experience the world. And guess what? That starts at home, in our marriages, and in our families. Who we choose to spend our lives with is a big decision. I heard David Brooks last spring talking to the Vanderbilt seniors on class day, graduation day. I heard him say to them that 80% of their happiness or 80% of their misery would be determined by the person that they chose to marry. And they all kind of sat there and looked at him like with wide eyes and didn't really seem to get what he was saying. A lot of them hadn't thought about that. Therefore, we should pick that person carefully, right? That's a big life decision. And too many young people don't take that decision seriously enough. They go to school, they get a degree, they get out, they get a job, and then people say, when are you going to get married? And sometimes they jump into marriage and they hadn't given enough thought to who the person is that they jumped into marriage with. I talked to you last Sunday about how following Jesus will help us navigate and handle our emotions, and I mean that. But in our text today, Jesus is moving on from talking about anger to talking about lust and adultery. He says, you've heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you, everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And then Jesus starts talking about boundaries. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. In the Bible, this is what we call hyperbole. Jesus is exaggerating to make his point, or we'd all be walking around without a right hand or without a right eye, right? But the point that Jesus is making is don't put yourself in situations that will lead you astray. Don't associate with people that will take you down the wrong path. Some of you are familiar with a guy by the name of Henry Cloud. Henry Cloud is a renowned therapist who recently moved here to Nashville from California, along with everybody else. I had the chance to meet Henry Cloud a couple of months ago at a friend's house, and I've been working to try to get him here to speak at Woodmont. That'll happen at some point, but I'm working on it. But Cloud, if you recall, became famous in the counseling world decades ago because of his work on boundaries. He has always said that boundaries matter when it comes to life and relationships, and we neglect them to our own detriment. And we can't have a conversation about this passage of Scripture without talking about the importance of boundaries. In the landmark book that he published back in 1992, so that was over 30 years ago, right, with a guy named John Townsend, Cloud identifies 8 common myths around boundaries. These are things that people often believe, but they're not true. What are they? First, he said, if I set boundaries, I'm being selfish. That's not true. Appropriate boundaries actually increase our ability to care for others. Secondly, he said, boundaries are a sign of disobedience. No, setting boundaries actually demonstrates a healthy level of faith. Third, he said, if I begin setting boundaries, I will be hurt by others. No, setting boundaries can keep you from being hurt by others. Fourth, if I set boundaries, I will hurt others. No, appropriate boundaries don't control, attack, or hurt anyone. They are just smart. Fifth, he said, boundaries mean that I am angry. But people with mature boundaries are the least angriest people in our culture. Sixth, when others set boundaries, it injures me. That's not true. It just demonstrates that they are not available all the time. 7, boundaries cause feelings of guilt. No, feelings of guilt arise when you're living a life that is out of balance. And 8, he said, boundaries are permanent, and I am afraid of burning my bridges. No, boundaries are not permanent, and you can change them at any time you choose. Henry Cloud has been in demand for decades because so many relationships in our culture lack healthy boundaries. And he talks about boundaries as they relate to marriage, to family, to children, to work, to friends, you name it. But since he first published that book over 30 years ago, what has changed? The digital revolution has taken place. Smartphones are now in our pockets. Social media shows us what everybody is doing at any given time. And people expect you to be available all the time. So this has taken the boundaries challenge to an entirely different level. I think one of the greatest challenges to the spiritual life, honestly, not the only challenge, but one of them, is to figure out how to navigate life with our phones. And Comer talks about that in this book that we've recommended. Technology, as great as it is, has made discipleship and spiritual growth much more challenging than it was before because we are always distracted, and many would argue addicted. We're always multitasking. Is it convenient to have a smartphone? Yes. But most people truly struggle with how to manage it, when to put it away. And then we tell our kids, you need to manage your smartphone, and they look at us and go, well, what about you, dad or mom? All families, parents, and children, and grandparents are having to navigate this. I do a lot of weddings as a pastor. That's not a secret. I don't do as many as I used to because Woodmont only does weddings for members now. We used to have a wedding policy where we did weddings for anybody in Nashville, and that was a lot, but now we just do it for members and their families. But when I meet with couples in premarital counseling, I ask them a few questions. The first question that I ask them is, what is it that makes or breaks a marriage? What is it that, if it's done well, will lead to a long, happy, healthy marriage, but if it's not done well, can lead to problems? But then I also focus on what I call the 5 big topics that I think all couples, all relationships need to talk about. What are they? Faith, family, friendships, career and location. Are they happy in Nashville and with what they're doing? And then money. And we're going to talk about money a little more next week. But if a couple's going to get married, then I believe that they need to spend a lot of time talking through those 5 big topics. And I usually give them a set of questions that will help them navigate that conversation. Faith matters in marriage because marriage has been instituted by God and blessed by Jesus Christ. And when 2 people decide to get married, faith should be at the center of it. So many people want to have their wedding at the church, and they want a minister to do their wedding, and they want scripture to be read, they want the Lord's Prayer to be prayed. But then when they get married, faith and church are not a part of their marriage. And that doesn't make any sense to me. Faith and spiritual growth have to be a big part of any healthy marriage. Then we talk about family. We talk about their families of origin. What type of marriage did their parents model? Do they come from a divorced home or not? Is their relationship with their immediate family going to get in the way of their own marriage progressing? If their mom or their dad is still their soulmate, then that can be a problem, right? And then we talk about children. How long do they want to wait before they have children? How many children do they want to have? And what will life be like when the children get here? We talk about friendship. Married couples need to be around other married couples so that they can relate and get support from them. That's why we push small groups here so much. Couples need to have these relationships because the company that you keep and the people that are around you will have a huge impact on the type of marriage that you have. We talk about career and location. Do they like what they're doing? Do they like being in Nashville? And then we get to money. And money is the biggest topic because, frankly, it brings all the other stuff together. Money, research tells us, is the number one factor that leads to problems in marriage, but it manifests itself in many different ways. It has to do with expectations. It has to do with lifestyle and spending and saving and giving back. If couples are not on the same page when it comes to issues of money, that's going to lead to problems down the road, and I see it all the time. And sometimes money becomes a substitute for an authentic, healthy relationship. Money does not equal quality time and love. It's not a substitute. It never has been. It never will be. And couples have to communicate about money. They have to talk about it. Because like Andy Stanley said in one of his great pieces that I often give to couples, he said, it's easy to let our desires and our wishes turn into expectations, and then we get disappointed so easily as life begins to play out. Now, obviously, bringing children into the world makes a couple closer, but that does not mean that you can put your marriage on cruise control. Working towards raising your kids is not the same thing as working on your marriage, and yet many people seem to forget that. Parenting is an adventure. Right, Megan? Wherever you are. She's a deacon today. And I have the utmost respect for parents that do it by themselves for whatever reason. Single parents. They need our prayers and they need our support. They need our love. We have to take the responsibility of parenthood very seriously. And remember, those little eyes are always watching and those little ears are always listening. And when it comes to parenting, we need patience. We need prayer. We need stamina. And we need to be able to see the bigger picture and not turn little things into major catastrophes. That's what children do, not what adults should do. In our text this morning, Jesus talks about lust and adultery. Many people skip this passage, by the way. They roll right on to the next one because it's a tough text. I thought about it, but I figured we had to stop here. It was a problem back in the day, and it's still a problem today. People who make the decision to cheat on their spouse do a lot of damage. There was once a study done as to why people cheat on their spouse, and they reported the results in women's health. And here's what they came up with. I'm just sharing this with you. These are the top reasons why people ultimately decided to cheat. 1, they felt like they were falling out of love. 2, they're feeling completely neglected and unimportant. 3, they're doing it out of anger or revenge, which is not healthy. 4, they have unmet needs. 5, they have low self-esteem. 6, they have commitment issues. 7, they were drunk. You laugh, but that's true. And 8, they've become bored or complacent in their relationship. With the couples that I've worked with over the years, there is one word that I always think about when it comes to affairs and couples that have challenges, and that word is neglect. When couples have been married for a long time and they put their marriage on cruise control and they neglect each other's needs, and then a spouse turns somewhere else to get those needs met. But the very best thing that I think we can do to prevent this is to make sure that we have a healthy marriage or a healthy relationship to begin with, which means we have to be proactive. Now, I'll leave you with these thoughts today about what a healthy marriage or a healthy relationship looks like, and then I'll find out later what I missed or what I got wrong. But this is my best attempt to say, how do we prevent this from happening? You have a healthy marriage. You've built it up. You're intentional about it. And so here's some thoughts that I'll leave you with. The first one is this. The biggest difference between couples that make it over the long run and those who don't really boils down to one simple thing, according to research. Do they like each other, and do they honor their friendship? the end of the day, couples who stay together over the long run have learned to enjoy each other's company. We were joking with Jay before the service. He's an empty nester now. And Farrell said, what's it like to be an empty nester and to go do all these fun things? But couples who make it over the long run enjoy each other's company and friendship. Second, healthy marriages are free of contempt. John Gottman says that there are four things, and I wrote this in the Spire this week, there are four things that we need to avoid in marriage and in relationships: criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. But when contempt gets in there, it leads to a lot of problems. Most couples who get divorced had something happen that they never unpacked or never worked through. And contempt is built over time. And contempt is toxic. And so you have to avoid it. You have to deal with it as life unfolds. 3, healthy marriages learn the art of compromise. One person doesn't always get their way. You know, sometime in the men's groups, you hear this, I'm right, you're right, I'm wrong. That's what I've learned to say. Or happy wife, happy life. And there's a lot of truth to that, right? But it's really not fair if one person is always getting their way. There's give and take, and common ground is found. Decisions in life are made together. 4th, healthy marriages have healthy conversations. David Brooks, who has a great section on marriage in his book, The Second Mountain, says the quality of the conversation is the quality of the marriage. Good conversation creates warmth and peace, and bad conversation creates frigidity and stasis. The way you talk to your spouse matters. Paul writes to the Ephesians, Farrell read it, let no evil talk come out of your mouths, but only what is useful for building up as there is need, so that your words may give grace to those who hear. Healthy marriages find ways to overcome disappointment together. The question is not, are we going to be disappointed in life? We are. The question is, how are we going to overcome it and work through it? 6th, in healthy marriages, the spouses are kind to each other and they don't take each other for granted. They don't just give each other what's left over at the end of the day. They give each other their best because that's what they deserve. And then lastly, 7, in healthy marriages, the couple has learned to forgive each other and move forward. In other words, they don't keep holding things from the past over the other person's head, because that's what leads to contempt. Forgiveness is essential in life, and it's essential in marriage. Now, if you know me, then you know that I want the church to be a place that supports marriages and families. I want the church to be a place to where if somebody goes through a divorce, they can realize it's not the end and they can rebuild their lives and find the love and support that they need at that particular time. I want Woodmont to be a place where that happens, and I think that it is. But the best way to prevent adultery, I think, is to have a healthy and happy marriage, to be proactive, to have boundaries, and to not look back and say, I wish I had tried harder. Marriage is hard, relationships are hard. Megan and I have been married almost 16 years, we have 3 kids. It's a lot, and you guys know that. But I'll go back to a quote from a therapist in this church who said this to me years ago. I've never forgotten it. He goes, I wish we put half as much time into our marriages and our relationships as we did into choosing our child's kindergarten. Think about that. Amen.